years from now, when they are battling in outer space, they will look back at people like my grandfather and say, that's where it all began. It is there, thousands of feet above the ground, that my grandfather, Billy Bishop, has forever carved out a place in history. Like the knights of old, he's taken on almost mythical status. Sometimes it doesn't seem real, even to me, his own granddaughter. My first connection with the legend of Billy Bishop was much more down to earth. It was hidden in my father's underwear drawer. It was 1963, and I was 10 years old. I was too young to understand that these were some of the most prestigious war medals ever awarded. They were from the First World War, and they were my grandfather's. I don't know what attracted me, but I guess I'd been told they were important, and I felt their power. So I went back to that spot over and over again, until one day, I just decided to take them to school.
Morning, class. What I'd like to do today is start with a little show and tell. Diana, you're first. What do you have here in the brown paper bag?
It made me feel special to stand up there talking about my famous grandfather. And that's when it began to register that this was a piece of history and a legacy that he had left behind.
Unbelievable.
Growing up, I really didn't know much about Billy Bishop, the war hero. After all, he died when I was only 3. My Billy Bishop was the one my family told me about. The elegant man in the family photographs, wearing the latest tailored suit from Savile Row in London, playing polo, and visiting Winston Churchill at number 10 Downing Street. But that, too, was a larger-than-life image. Then something happened. A black cloud descended, raising doubts.
This movie, financed by the National Film Board, was released in 1982 as a documentary. It came to the startling conclusion that Billy Bishop may have faked his solo attack on a German airfield, where he is reported to have destroyed 3 enemy aircraft.
I was shaken. I took the attack on my grandfather personally. But I was afraid to pay too much attention, afraid to shatter the image of the Billy Bishop I had come to know and love, the one I had come to know through my family. By that time, though, I'd grown up, earned a journalism degree, and become a TV correspondent.
Nice guy, though.
You'd think being a reporter, I would have asked questions, gotten to the bottom of how I feel about all of this. But I didn't. It took something more. My mother. She died. We were so close. And it wasn't just that I'd lost a parent, but I felt a sense of panic. I wanted to hold on to family memories, but they were slipping away. My mother knew I had begun searching for answers and had encouraged me to gather up the family stories before it was too late. I hear you, Mom. So now I am. I am not sure exactly what I'm looking for, but I know I need my father to help me.
Dad?
Lauren, I'm just
how are
finishing.
ya?
I'm just finished packing up.
Oh, good.
He's 79 years old and now lives in a small condo in Toronto. He's the son of Billy Bishop and a former fighter pilot himself.
And I'm going to wear my miniature medals
Let's see.
because it's formal.
Great. Look at them. Yeah, they're nice and light, too, eh? Those are nice.
Okay, that's it.
Boy, I wish I could pack like that.
Geez, I'm going to be worn out by the time.
I want to know more about my grandfather, but I know this is about my father, too. So I've asked him to come with me on a journey to rediscover my roots, our roots.
You get the door, and I'll lock it, okay?
Okay.
All right, where we go?
Our destination is only a couple of hours away, but it will take us more than 100 years back in time.
Okay, well, tell me a little bit about your speech on Sunday. What are you going to say?
What do you want me to say?
Well, practice it. Practice your speech.
On Sunday, when is it?
Well, it's around noon in the opening ceremonies that you'll be giving a speech.
I thought the opening ceremony is on Saturday,
No,
them cutting the
for
ribbon.
That's for the Billy Bishop Museum.
Oh,
And
yeah,
Then
well,
it's the
this is-
airport. The airport is the one in front of all the people. You going to say anything about heroes, though?
No.
No? Why? I just think it's sort of an important time to talk about heroes, don't you?
Well, you're getting back to this thing with this controversy thing if you get into that.
True, but maybe not even. I mean,
I'll think about it.
Owen Sound. It's pretty much the way it was when my grandfather grew up here, and he is still the favorite son. This week, a large celebration has been planned in his honor.
Hi. There we are. Nice, bright, sunny day. Good flying weather.
and then, Dad, is this the,
It's a machine gun.
yeah, but it's called what? It's called
Lewis gun.
the Lewis gun, right?
It's a drum. It's a drum fed.
Yeah.
He used to get underneath the guy and pull it down and fire like that right into the...
Right straight up?
Into the bottom of the plane.
And what would that do?
Well, blow the bloody plane apart.
Billy Bishop was born William Avery Bishop on February 8, 1894. The second son of Margaret and the county registrar, Will Bishop. My cousin Fred McKay is Billy Bishop's nephew and grew up in the same house. The house is now the Billy Bishop Heritage Museum, and it's my first connection with my grandfather's past.
Your grandfather, my uncle, is a great guy. He was a bit of a fun, but he carved his name in all sorts of places. He's got his name carved in.
Oh, look.
Got it in there.
You look like he was practicing here.
Yeah.
And then,
W-A.
oh, there, the big initials, W-A.
Yeah, and that's...
William Avery.
Yes. The picture at the top of the stairs is the official war picture of Uncle Billy,
Oh, yeah, the famous one.
the famous one, and Mother had it hanging in the living room.
Yeah, it's our favorite.
Okay. The room right here on the left, was Billy's room.
Parade! Stand at ace!
Oh, wow, this is a real attic.
Yeah, this is a real attic. We'll take you up. I've had people that have stayed in the house and they won't come back because they say it's spooked.
My grandfather was pretty much an ordinary kid, but he was looking for adventure. The year was 1911, and Billy Bishop was 17 years old. He'd followed his older brother Worth to the spit and polish of Canada's Royal Military College in Kingston.
Is here, 943, William Avery Bishop. Has the date that he joined the college, the 28th of August, 1911. Has his position in the joining batch, his height. He was a
5'6"
wee lad.
Yeah, same height as me.
5'6".
It was my grandfather who started the myth that he was the worst cadet the college ever had. It has always bothered me that people make hay that he was caught cheating on his exams and probably would have been expelled if the First World War hadn't come along. But it really didn't matter because war did break out and Billy Bishop jumped right in. Billy started out in the cavalry. But when he found himself shipped overseas and knee-deep in mud, I can understand that he was determined not to end his life there. Flying was new and dangerous, but that just intrigued my grandfather. And before long, he talked himself into the British Royal Flying Corps, first as an observer, and then later as a pilot. On March 7, 1917, Billy Bishop was assigned to France as the newest member of 60 Squadron at Files Camp Farm.
These are letters that are written by Uncle Billy.
Oh, wow.
To his mother, and they were written during the war. And they cover.
My cousin Fred has kept letters that Billy wrote home to his parents. Letters that I never even knew existed. I'd never been all that interested in his exploits in the air, but suddenly it all came alive for me.
Today I have had the most exciting adventure of my life. 4 of us were on patrol and 3 Huns met us. We did battle, as they say. I opened fire on one and another fired on me. I hit my man, I think, or he fell out of control. Then I arrived back here. I found myself a young hero, the only person in number 60 Squadron who has brought down a Hun machine without help. By the way, the Hun, I learned, crashed on the other side of the line. I slept 16 and a half hours last night. I had gone 84 hours without sleep. The excitement kept me up. The great thing is that I have 1 Hun to my credit. I have forgotten if I told you how I got my 3rd Hun. Anyway, he was easy. Down I dived vertically 2,000 feet. I did the first...
Was he just too young and cocky to be afraid? Or was it that he had found something he was really good at and it made him feel powerful?
Enough for now. I will probably have leave I will probably have left when this reaches you. I never felt better in my life, though. Your loving son, Billy.
What you're looking at here is aviation in its infancy. This aircraft was built only 15 years after the Wright brothers first flew.
I can't talk to my grandfather, so I've asked Earl Smith to help me read between the lines. He flies a replica of the SE-5A, the plane my grandfather flew later in the war.
Your grandfather would have had to contend with engines that were not particularly noted for lasting very long, and they could quit at any moment.
He must have had nerves of steel.
My total now is 36.
Many of the engines of the day were oiled with castor oil, which meant that it came back into the faces of the pilots, and
What would that have been like?
well, it gave them diarrhea, something fierce.
I have got 42 now. My last 2 I brought down in one flight. I had just climbed through the clouds and 3 attacked me. I went ahead onto the first one, who lost his nerve and swerved. In the second, I had him in massive flames. I go on leave next Sunday for 14 days. Much love, yours, Billy.
They carried spare ammunition drums, and they would change those drums in flight. But can you imagine what it was like to take this drum off of the top of that gun with a 100-mile-an-hour wind, trying to blow it right into your face? That's really what he was facing. So they would fly with the stick between their knees, and they would manage to get this drum off and replace it with another one, all in a 100-mile-an-hour wind.
And
all while somebody else is trying to shoot you down.
Did I tell you, too, that I am getting the DSO, the Distinguished Service Order, to wear beside the other? What does that say? For the love of heaven, don't let anyone see the above. It is so conceited. I was thinking the same thing, but you certainly would want to brag to your parents.
It's as if my grandfather was playing a game, not fighting a war, but a game of such skill. How else could he have survived? First World War pilots faced an almost certain death, and many in his squadron had already been killed. The Germans had put a price on his head and were taking bets about who could shoot him down. And yet, what happened next sent my grandfather soaring into history, a turning point that some have used to ignite a debate that haunts his memory. Cornwall, Ontario, and I head out to a debate about Billy Bishop. It's normal, I think, when someone in your family is attacked, to feel personally attacked. I know I did. It has always hurt me when people ask, is your grandfather a liar? But now that I understand what it took for him to climb into that biplane day after day, I am puzzled why there's such a fuss, especially all these years later. You see, what set my grandfather apart from other fighter pilots of his day is that he often headed out alone to face the enemy. And that's exactly what he did on that day of June 2nd, 1917. His goal, to attack a German aerodrome. So daring, it had never been attempted before. Billy flew deeper behind enemy lines than he intended, but he found that airfield and carried out a surprise attack. 7 German aircraft scrambled to engage him, and in his combat report, he says in a lone battle, he successfully drove down 3 of them. It was a feat that earned him the most coveted of all war medals, the Victoria Cross. King George V himself presented it to my grandfather. The fighting was all done behind enemy lines. It was difficult for anyone to confirm the details. And so a few have accused my grandfather of faking the whole thing. It is a controversy that has raged for over 20 years.
I'm used to it. I've had to live with it all my life, so there's nothing new about this. I just know how to handle it and how to cope with it.
My aunt, Billy Bishop's daughter.
I don't think my father was, for one thing, capable of such a magnificent lie.
If you could possibly do it, let somebody else do your fighting for you, which it did at one stage in the game. When this thing came up again, I said, I'm going to pussyfoot around anymore, and I just said, this is a lot of bullshit.
Well, they haven't been able to figure out how he couldn't have. So, it's true or false. Did he or didn't he? I say he did.
My grandfather probably would have laughed. But I admit I feel frustrated. Frustrated that I can't prove either way what the truth is and put this whole debate to rest.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Don Pearson said something about an intimidating audience. Well, I want to tell you that none of you intimidate me. But I do feel a little bit embarrassed because of the presence of Miss Bishop here. It cannot be pleasant to hear your grandpa being metaphorically kicked in the teeth. I don't see any way around this, so my apologies, ma'am, and you just have to live with it, I'm afraid.
Don't talk to my granddaughter like that.
It's absolutely
Okay,
inconceivable to me.
now I really want the good guy to win.
Bishop repeatedly asked for accompaniment on the raid. I submit that those about to commit fraud do normally not invite witnesses to the event.
No, Billy, no! You said I could come with you! No!
Now, the other part of this is, where did he do the damage? Well, he didn't know.
Billy Bishop, of all people, knew where he was, as far as I'm concerned. 85 years ago, right from day one, he said either Een or A want. Either Een or A want.
He claimed the aircraft he attacked were D1s and Albatross D1s and D2s.
And he's getting his ass blown off. And he says, gee, are those Albatross D1s or D2s or D3s? Maybe I better sit here and orbit and get shot at a little bit more, because 85 years from now, this is going to be subject to the endless parsing of armchair warriors, and it's an absolutely vital point. With respect to shooting up his own aircraft, to enhance his own credibility, this is quite simply a ludicrous statement.
The gun must have been fired from a range of 2 or 3 feet at the most. And the only interpretation in that case is that he did indeed land somewhere, spend a few minutes on the ground shooting holes in his own machine, and then flew home.
Any implication that a pilot would intentionally weaken an airframe with known structural defects simply does not pass a common sense test.
Record keeping was excellent.
So, two sides of the story, no simple truth. Why has it become such a big deal? My cousin Catherine has joined me. She, too, is Billy Bishop's granddaughter.
You know, we're so hard on our heroes as Canadians, we really are, and part of that is great because we're skeptical, and I think that's good about, I feel that.
Okay.
But in the end, do you feel that you've done a disservice here in the sense that,
No.
People, we need our heroes?
No.
And
I think he was a terrible liar and cheat. But he was a brave man. All too many people think, if you're a liar and a cheat, you can't be a brave man. Or if you're a brave man, you can't be a liar and a cheat. You can be both. A lot of people are both, I expect, to some degree or other. So I've got mixed views on him. I can't sort of give you a simple answer to that at any time.
you want to say anything?
I wouldn't discredit your grandfather. I really don't have much to say. Sorry.
What a great thing to say.
My grandfather was a terrible alcoholic.
We won't go there. We won't go there. Thank you, Mr.
How do I get this damn thing off?
The first time I heard my grandfather's voice was in a movie. Because not only was Billy Bishop a war hero, he was a celebrity. And it wasn't long before Hollywood came calling. It was a film about a couple of Canadian bush pilots who wanted to enlist in the Royal Canadian Air Force.
And there's a picture of a man who knows all about flying. He's the man we should have seen. Oh, Billy. Billy Bishop. There's his picture. Oh, Billy Bishop, of course. Certainly. He was an ace in the last war. Yes, he flew by the seat of his pants, and he was an A, shot down 72 planes. An air marshal in this war. A very important man.
It was 1941, and my grandfather played himself as Canada's air marshal in charge of recruiting for the British Commonwealth Air Training Program.
Men, the wings which I am about to present you.
There was something so reassuring about that voice. It made him a lot more real to me. And I love these pictures. It looks as if he enjoyed the glamour, and he seemed right at home in Hollywood, where he mingled with some of the biggest names in the business. But I knew if I were to get to the heart of what I was looking for, I would have to go back to the people who knew my grandfather best, my own family. And for that, I need to go once again back in time, back to 1917. Billy Bishop is suddenly the most decorated airman of the war, an international hero. In Canada, there were crowds to meet him, his picture in all the papers. He was young, handsome, and in love with one of the country's most eligible ladies, Margaret Bishop, the granddaughter of department store mogul Timothy Eaton. The Eaton family dug out this wedding footage, another piece of family history I never even knew existed. My grandfather took my grandmother back to England, where a few months later he was back in the war. This time as head of his own squadron, the Flying Foxes. He did some of his most outstanding flying during this period, adding 25 victories in just 12 days. And on his very last day, is credited with shooting down 5 planes.
He was a Victoria Cross. He was the top British ace, and he was lionized in England like you wouldn't believe. The royal family liked him, and, you know, he played polo with Winston Churchill and all these people. But he still had that rambunctiousness of the aviator and a playboy instinct.
But he just had a personality that and he had a smile, a silly smile, and a twinkle in his eye, and you just had to like him. Terribly good looking to start with. But and he could be extremely serious. But the rest of the time, he was just a fun-loving person. Everybody loved him.
I personally have always marveled at his sense of style.
He was voted one of the 10 best-dressed men in Canada one year.
Really?
But he always went walking with his dog, of course. Dogs.
Dogs. That's something my grandfather and I have in common. My grandfather's preference was the Chinese chow, and one of my favorite stories is when he used one of the dogs as a centerpiece at a dinner party.
There's no good reason. It was just a dinner party they were having, and they had about 8 people, I suppose, and the dog sat in the middle of the table.
How did he ever get the dog to stay there?
We just said stay, and she did.
Excuse me. I just think it's sort of interesting I ended up with a Chinese dog, too. But anyway.
I also have wondered, what do you do when you've reached the top at age 23? Wouldn't the rest of your life be an anticlimax? If it was, my grandfather sure didn't show it. He was just a natural risk-taker, even after the war. His business ventures didn't always work out, like the small airline he started with another Canadian VC, Billy Barker. And he lost all his money in the stock market crash in 1929. That didn't seem to bother him much either. What I admire about him is that Billy just seemed to grab life by the tail. My father says Billy was kind of a swinger, even before the word had been invented. My grandmother died before I had the courage to ask her about that.
They had a very, very special relationship.
Were they cross with each other, or?
Oh, she hit him every now and then.
You just took a whack at him.
He took a whack at him?
Yeah.
And he thought she was the cat's meow.
My mother, Priscilla, married into the Bishop clan and thought the world of Billy. There is one story she shared with me that told me more about the man than any of the medals he received.
She was pregnant with her first child, an older brother for me. And a week before she was going to give birth, she went to the doctor by herself, and the doctor told her that the baby had died in the womb. I can't imagine how tragic that must have been. She went right to my grandparents' house, and Margaret and Billy were there. She spent the week with them, only to learn that not only did she have lost her child, that she would have to deliver her child. I can't imagine what that must have been like. And she said she would never have got through it without Billy. She said he kept her spirits up. He made her laugh. And then, the day that she had to go to the hospital, he took her. He went with her. And he was there when she delivered the baby. And of course, after that, she was not quite the same for a long time. But she said she would never forget that her whole life. And I won't either.
How does that look? Right down.
I don't know. You'd have to tell me.
Very nice.
All right.
Okay. Have a nice day.
If my grandfather had a starring role in life, I figure my father's a supporting actor. In fact, the way I see it, he's had to play the same role much of his life, that of Billy Bishop's son.
I need a drink, though. When don't I need a drink?
I'm pleased to welcome you to today's celebrations. We're here today to not only pay tribute to Billy Bishop, but to honor all the men and women he represents.
Like sons of other famous fathers, he's lived in that shadow much of his life. He always talks about it as if it was a privilege, which it was. But sometimes I feel the weight of this enormous legacy, and I wonder what I would have done in his shoes. Because there seemed to be no question when my father fell into the Second World War that he'd become a fighter pilot too.
We'll go back here. The son follows father's path. He must have got pretty sick of those headlines, eh?
Well, I mean, we all joked about it, you know. There's more of the same.
That's a great picture.
That picture.
Billy Bishop.
That's the
Billy Bishop Jr.? Oh, Dad, you poor thing.
Well,
Constantly.
Well, that's what they said.
Yeah.
Did
you get this one?
John Aylen is my uncle, my mother's brother. He and his wife, Andre, were frequent visitors to the Bishop household.
What was their relationship when you knew them? Because they would have been
It was like brothers more than
really?
Father and son. Yes. Your grandfather was always happy to have Arthur around, and Arthur was always providing him with more humor.
Arthur was able to follow in his father's footsteps right down to the flying and the wartime experiences. No wonder your grandfather was so proud of him.
My father arrived overseas in the fall of 1942. He joined 401 Squadron, flying the latest marvel in aerial combat, the sleek and swift Spitfire.
I've forgotten which side you get in.
It'll come back to you like riding a bicycle back.
I've got flaps.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
What does it feel like?
Great.
It was light years between the two wars. Flying was faster and more of a team effort.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't want to go all alone over France by yourself when you know there's 500 fighters there waiting to shoot you down.
Like his father, my father survived more than 100 operational flights into danger. Still, the media joked that between my grandfather and my father, they shot down 73 planes. My grandfather, of course, credited with 72, my father with 1.
You know, they write all that nonsense in the papers. I mean, Jesus, I was more interested in staying alive than anything, worrying about getting a better score than my old man, for God's sake. And all of a sudden, there was an explosion right there. Yeah. It blew out. Some blew a hole in the... Overheated. Yeah, it blew a hole in the side of the plane. I could see the trees ahead. And I thought, okay, this is it. I'm dead. You know, there's a funny feeling, but I said, I'm dead. So the next thing I knew, I woke up on the side of the road. I don't know how I got there. I don't know.
I'm wondering whether you, as a flyer in the Second World War, suffered by comparison with your father. Did you find that you had a tremendous load to carry?
It's a little difficult to go into a war with that reputation behind you, but once I got into it, I found I was worrying about myself enough to forget about the reputation that was behind me.
Yeah, very sensible, too.
I wasn't worried about my old man and all that. I mean, he wasn't helping me to fly. He wasn't teaching me anything. But I was more worried about learning to fly myself than I was of what people thought of him or me or anybody else.
My father's sister was in the women's division of the Air Force and says it was probably harder than my father will admit.
I found it terribly difficult when I was in the Air Force with the name of Bishop. Now that is when I found it really tough.
Why?
Because if I got 95, 98% in an exam, which was quite likely with me, well, of course, she's Bishop's daughter. So if they did that to me, think how long they did it to your father.
And how did he handle it?
I think he handled it magnificently, frankly.
I'm convinced that there is more, but I will never know. Perhaps I'm just trying too hard to find answers. For more than 30 years, my father has spent most of his time writing military history, including his father's biography. Perhaps that's how he channels his feelings and emotions, by telling other people's stories.
This is a letter to my father, from my father when I came off operations.
You cannot imagine what a relief and a joy your letters are to your mom. Aw. And also to me, as I think I have some idea of the hell you are going through.
Yeah.
In any case, you will always be glad all your life that you have taken your part in this job. I have not yet telephoned Mom that you may be back soon, but I know how what her feelings will be, as you are never a moment out of her mind and thoughts and prayers. What a nice letter.
Yeah, well, that's enough of that.
And that's what I've learned about my father. Just when you think he might open up, he shuts the door. But I understand that better now, and I love him more than ever.
That's the best shot you've done yet.
How does the old Bing Crosby song go? What do you do with a general when he stops being a general? Retirement didn't suit my grandfather. He started spending the winters in Florida. He had lived enough to fill 7 lifetimes, and like a flame that had burned too boldly, he had burned himself out.
Ladies and gentlemen, when war broke out, my duty called me back to the service of my country.
My grandfather had dedicated his life to Canada's efforts in 2 world wars and to speaking out about the future of aviation. Civilian life paled by comparison. In September 1956, death came to Billy Bishop in the early morning. They wrote, "At that hour before dawn, when he must often have been making ready for his solitary flights." It sure stands out. The Bishop name on it. Wow. Oh my goodness, look at that. There he is.
I think because of this weekend ceremonies that somebody thought to do this.
The family kept the tradition of calling the next generation after Billy. My brother's name is Bill. But traditions don't always last. My brother called his son Douglas. Still, he is the only one left to carry on the Bishop name.
Like a video game. One time he was flying along, and a bullet from some other plane went right through the windshield, right, and hit the back of the plane right here. And it was like 1 inch from his head. And if it had been 1 inch closer to his head, then he would have died, and you would never be born either. Imagine that. Then I wouldn't have been born either.
He's still talked about, isn't he? Why is that?
Well, I think he always will be, because he was so different from the norm. I mean, you meet a normal so-called hero. I don't necessarily mean somebody who shot down 72 planes, but I mean just somebody who did something really kind of great. But you don't really care that much, because he didn't have the personality, but Dad did.
How many people shoot down 72 planes and stuck their neck out? I mean, but he was that sort of a guy. He was that sort of a guy. I mean, if you knew him, you could tell he was that sort of a guy. He was a fighter beyond belief. It was a brand new arena, the sky. And it was an unproven thing. He conquered it, pioneered it, made it into something glamorous. And it never diminished.
I began my journey wanting to know more about my grandfather. But I know now I was looking for truth. The truth about my grandfather, the truth about his impact on my father, and on my life too. And I guess I was afraid of what I might find. But at the end of my journey, I feel a tremendous sense of relief. In a way, I've discovered my own truth. I have a deepened respect for my grandfather, the fighter pilot, and the integrity of my grandfather, the man. And I found my father, and a bond that continues to grow.
Give it the old salute.
So now, by chance, when I see that rare biplane in the sky, I can imagine my grandfather taking off in the chill of the early morning, setting out to face the enemy. Alone, vulnerable, but all the same feeling empowered. And it gives me quite a thrill to think how lucky I am to have such a heritage and a family that is so very proud of him.